The story begins in the grand palace of the kingdom, where a young maid named Elira works tirelessly. She wakes before dawn, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, and attending to the demands of the nobles. Despite her hard work, she is invisible to those around her, nothing more than a servant meant to be neither seen nor heard. Life in the palace is unforgiving for a maid. The noble women mock her ragged clothes, the guards ignore her presence, and the other servants are too afraid to befriend her. She often goes hungry, as the best food is reserved for the royal family, and only scraps remain for the lower servants. Any mistake, no matter how small, results in harsh punishment, whether a slap from an impatient noble or extra hours of labor. Yet, Elira endures it all in silence. Despite her hardships, there is something different about her. Unlike the other maids, she listens carefully to the whispers of the court, memorizing the political struggles and alliances. When delivering food to the royal library, she secretly reads the books left behind, learning about history, strategy, and even languages forbidden to commoners. She is clever, observant, and quick-witted, though she hides her intelligence behind a mask of obedience. Elira is not just intelligent, but also kind. She shares what little food she has with younger servants, secretly tends to the wounds of a beaten stable boy, and helps an elderly cook when no one else will. Though life in the palace is cruel, she refuses to let it harden her heart. One evening, as she clears the grand dining hall, she overhears a hushed conversation between two nobles. Their words are filled with tension, discussing something that could change the fate of the kingdom. Though she is only a maid, she realizes she has stumbled upon something dangerous, something that might soon drag her from the shadows into the center of a storm. As Elira continues her life in the palace, small but strange things begin to happen, things she cannot ignore. One day, while dusting the grand hall, she notices a portrait of an old queen. The woman's features are hauntingly familiar. Something about the sharpness of her eyes and the curve of her face mirrors Elira's own reflection. She brushes off the thought, telling herself it is just a coincidence. After all, she is only a maid, but the coincidences keep piling up. An elderly librarian, Master Cedric, often watches her with a knowing gaze. He is one of the few nobles who treats her with kindness, sometimes leaving old scrolls and books where she can find them. One evening, when she returns a book she had secretly borrowed, he finally speaks. "You read faster than any maid I've ever met," he says, his voice low but curious. "And you understand things no servant should." He does not press further, but his words linger in her mind. A few weeks later, an unexpected event changes everything. The royal family hosts a feast, inviting diplomats from neighboring kingdoms. The palace is filled with tension as political negotiations unfold behind closed doors. Elira is assigned to serve in the banquet hall, pouring wine and clearing plates. She remains quiet and unnoticed until disaster strikes. One of the noble emissaries, a foreign lord, becomes furious over a mistranslation of a critical message. The room falls into chaos as accusations fly, and the threat of war looms in the air. Without thinking, Elira steps forward and calmly corrects the translation, having secretly learned the foreign tongue from the books in the library. For a moment, silence hangs in the air. The nobles stare at her in shock. A mere maid, speaking fluently in a language reserved for scholars and diplomats. The foreign emissary narrows his eyes. "Who taught you to speak my language, girl?" Elira lowers her gaze, realizing she has made a mistake. She should not have spoken. She should have remained invisible. But it is too late. The damage, or perhaps the opportunity, has already been created. That night, Master Cedric finds her in the servants' quarters. His expression is unreadable. "There is more to you than you know, child," he says quietly. "And perhaps more than even you were meant to know." For the first time, Elira begins to wonder, who is she, truly? And why does she feel as though she was meant for something greater? The days following the feast are tense. Elira keeps her head down, hoping the nobles will forget her moment of indiscretion. But whispers spread. Servants murmur about how a mere maid spoke the language of diplomats. Some nobles glance at her with suspicion, while others seem strangely curious. Then, the crisis strikes. One night, the palace is thrown into chaos. Shouts echo through the corridors, and the sound of clashing steel fills the air. A coup has begun. A faction of nobles, unhappy with the king's rule, has seized the opportunity to overthrow him. Guards loyal to the crown battle traitors in the halls, and servants flee in terror. Elira barely has time to react before she is caught in the middle of it. While carrying a tray of food through the corridors, she turns a corner and stumbles upon a shocking scene. The crown prince, wounded and gasping for breath, cornered by an assassin in the dimly lit hallway. She should run. She should pretend she saw nothing. But something inside her refuses to let that happen. Without thinking, she grabs a nearby candlestick and hurls it at the assassin. The distraction is enough. The prince, despite his injury, manages to fight back, overpowering the would-be killer. When the danger is over, he turns to her, his eyes filled with surprise. "You saved my life," he breathes. But there is no time for gratitude. More enemies are coming. The prince is still weak, and the halls are crawling with traitors. Elira makes a split-second decision. She helps him to his feet and guides him through the hidden servant passages she knows so well. They move in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on them. As they sneak through the palace, Elira realizes the truth. This is no mere rebellion. It is something far greater, something that could change the kingdom forever. And for reasons she does not yet understand, she is now a part of it. The palace burns. The rebellion is not just a small uprising, it is a full-scale coup, planned from within. Trusted nobles, high-ranking officials, even some of the king's personal guards have turned against the crown. The king himself is dragged from the throne room, his royal robes torn, his shouts of defiance drowned by the cheers of the traitors. Elira and the wounded prince watch from the shadows of a hidden corridor. She can feel his pain, not just from his injury, but from the betrayal of those he once trusted. His father, the king, is bound in chains. The queen and the princess are missing, their fate uncertain. Some of the royal loyalists fight desperately, but they are outnumbered. Then, the unthinkable happens. A familiar voice rings out among the traitors. Lord Carrion, the king's most trusted advisor, steps forward. "The age of the old king is over," he declares. "A new ruler shall take the throne." The prince clenches his fists. "Carrion, that snake, he's the one behind this." Elira barely has time to process his words before soldiers flood the palace, searching for survivors. She knows they cannot stay hidden for long. "We have to leave," she whispers, pulling the prince away. But before they can escape, a group of guards spots them. Swords are drawn. "There they are!" The traitor prince and his little servant. Elira's blood runs cold. "Traitor!" Lord Carrion steps forward, a wicked smile on his face. "Seize them both," he orders. The prince for execution, and the girl for questioning. She has been seen lurking where she does not belong. Who knows what secret she has overheard? Elira realizes the truth in an instant. The coup was not just about taking the throne. It was carefully orchestrated, and anyone who stood in the way would be eliminated. Even a mere maid, she does not get the chance to defend herself. Soldiers grab her, twisting her arms behind her back. The prince struggles, but his injury weakens him. As they are dragged away, Elira's mind races. This is it, the end. But deep inside her, something stirs, a refusal to let fate decide for her. If this is the fall of the palace, then she will rise from its ashes. The dungeons are dark, damp, and reeking of death. Elira is thrown into a cell, her wrists bound, her body aching from the rough treatment. The prince is taken elsewhere, his fate uncertain. For hours, she sits in silence, her mind racing. She has always been careful, always stayed invisible. But now she is a prisoner, accused of treason. Then, in the dead of night, the cell door creaks open. A hooded figure steps inside, moving with quiet precision. "Come with me if you want to live," a rough voice whispers. Elira hesitates, but she has no choice. The figure cuts her bindings and leads her through the underground tunnels beneath the palace. When they emerge outside the city walls, she finally sees her rescuer's face. Master Cedric, the old librarian. "You are more important than you realize, child," he says, guiding her toward the forest. "There is something in your blood, something they fear." As they travel deeper into the wilderness, Cedric reveals the truth. Elira is not just a maid. She is the last descendant of a lost royal bloodline, one that was nearly wiped out decades ago in a secret war for power. The portrait she once saw in the palace was not a coincidence. The queen in the painting was her ancestor. "That is why they wanted you dead," Cedric says, "because you have the right to challenge the usurpers." At first, Elira refuses to believe it. She is just a servant. She has no army, no power. But Cedric is not finished. "You also have a gift," he continues. "A skill buried deep within you, waiting to awaken." He leads her to a hidden rebel camp, where those still loyal to the old ways have gathered. She learns to fight, her once delicate hands gripping a sword with determination. She studies battle tactics, political strategy, and the art of deception. But more than that, she learns about herself, the fire inside her, the strength she never knew she had. Days turn to weeks, and Elira is no longer just a maid. She is something more. One night, as she stands atop a hill overlooking the ruined palace, she makes a silent vow. The kingdom may have fallen to traitors, but she will rise to take it back. The rebel camp is filled with whispers. A maid, the girl who once scrubbed floors and carried trays, is now being called a leader. Some doubt her, others scoff at the idea, but a few watch with quiet curiosity. Elira knows she cannot reclaim the kingdom alone. If she wants to stand against Lord Carrion and his usurpers, she needs an army. But who would follow a girl who once bowed to nobles? She begins with those who have already lost everything. The first to join her cause are the outcasts, the thieves, beggars, and disgraced warriors banished from the city. They have been crushed under the weight of noble cruelty for years, and they see in Elira a chance for vengeance. Next come the fallen knights, loyal warriors who once swore oaths to the true king, but were cast aside after the coup. Many are broken, ashamed of their failure, but when they hear of Elira's defiance, some dare to hope again. Then, the commoners, farmers, merchants, and blacksmiths who have suffered under the new tyrant's rule. Taxes have doubled, food is scarce, and dissent is met with execution. Desperation makes them bold. When they hear whispers of a hidden heir, they begin to rally. At first, Elira struggles to gain their trust. She is young, unproven, and worst of all, a former servant. Some question whether she has the right to lead, but she does not demand loyalty. Instead, she proves herself through action. When the usurper's soldiers raid a village, Elira leads a daring ambush, rescuing the captives and stealing supplies. She personally fights alongside her men, showing she is no spoiled noble but one of them. She speaks not of revenge, but of justice. Not of reclaiming power, but of rebuilding a kingdom where all are treated fairly. Slowly, the tide begins to turn. Her forces grow, her name spreads, and for the first time, the new rulers of the kingdom feel something they never expected from a mere maid. Fear. The night is thick with tension. Fires burn in the distance, marking the strongholds of the usurper's forces. Elira stands atop a ridge, overlooking the enemy camp, her unlikely army gathered behind her. Tonight, they do not fight as outcasts or rebels. Tonight, they fight as the kingdom's last hope. The plan is simple but daring. Lord Carrion's forces are overconfident. believing the rebellion to be nothing more than scattered peasants. But Elira knows better. She has studied their weaknesses, their blind spots. She will strike where they least expect it. As the moon reaches its peak, she signals her forces. The first wave moves silently, former thieves slipping through the shadows, cutting supply lines and disabling watchtowers. Then, a second group, disguised as common traders, infiltrates the camp, setting fire to their armory. Chaos erupts. The moment the flames rise, Elira leads the charge. She fights not from behind, but at the front, sword flashing under the firelight. Trained knights clash with her warriors, but her army fights with a hunger the enemy lacks. They are not fighting for power, they are fighting for their home. The battle rages, steel against steel, cries of pain and victory echoing into the night. At one point, Elira faces a heavily armoured general, a man twice her size. He sneers. "A servant girl dares to challenge me?" She does not answer with words, only action. She dodges his strike, using her agility over brute strength, outmaneuvering him until she lands the final blow. The watching soldiers hesitate, stunned. The girl they dismissed as a mere maid is now cutting through their strongest warriors. Fear spreads through the enemy ranks. With their leader fallen, Lord Carrion's soldiers begin to retreat. What was meant to be a crushing blow against the rebellion has turned into their own defeat. Elira stands victorious. As the dust settles, her soldiers look to her. Not as a servant, not even as just a leader, but as something greater, a symbol of hope. And the kingdom, watching from the shadows, begins to whisper a new name for her. The maid who would be queen. The throne room is bathed in the golden glow of torches, but the air is thick with tension. The final battle has been fought, the usurper's army broken, and the castle reclaimed. Only one thing remains. Lord Carrion sits upon the stolen throne, his once arrogant posture now stiff with fear. The nobles who supported him have either fled or surrendered. He is alone, save for the handful of guards still foolish enough to stand by him. The grand doors swing open. Elira steps inside, her boots echoing against the marble floors. She is no longer a maid in tattered rags. She wears the armor of a warrior, her blade still stained with the battle that brought her here. Her army stands behind her. Outcasts, knights, commoners, all who fought for justice. Carrion scoffs, though his voice wavers. "A servant girl, playing queen. You think the people will follow you?" Elira does not waver. She steps forward, her voice steady. "I do not need to play queen, Carrion. The people have already chosen." With those words, an old man steps forward, Master Cedric. In his hands, he holds a sealed document, a royal decree hidden for years. His voice, though aged, carries across the hall. The blood of the lost royal line runs through her veins. She is the rightful heir. Gasps fill the room. The remaining nobles whisper among themselves. The soldiers, once ready to die for Carrion, now hesitate. The truth is undeniable. Carrion rises from the throne, rage twisting his face. "Lies! She is nothing! A servant! She was born in the dirt and should have stayed there." He draws his sword, lunging in one final desperate act. But Elira is ready. She sidesteps, dodging his strike with the same agility that once helped her survive the palace corridors. With a single precise movement, she disarms him, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. He falls to his knees, defeated. Silence fills the throne room. Then, one by one, the people kneel. The knights who once doubted her, the commoners who suffered under tyranny, even the nobles recognizing the truth at last. For the first time, Elira does not feel like a servant. She feels like a queen. The great hall is silent. The weight of hundreds of gazes rests upon Elira as she stands before the throne. The same throne she once scrubbed clean as a servant, the same throne that countless rulers before her had claimed. And now, it is hers. But her feet remain frozen. The rebels, the knights, the people who fought for her, they are waiting. waiting for her to take the crown, to speak, to lead them into a new future. And yet, doubt grips her heart. She never wanted power. She never wanted to rule. She only wanted justice, to see the kingdom freed from tyranny. But sitting upon that throne means more than victory. It means responsibility. Decisions that will shape the future of thousands, if not millions. What if she is not enough? Lord Carrion's final words still echo in her mind. You were born in the dirt and should have stayed there. A hand touches her shoulder. Master Cedric, the man who had guided her, who had revealed her true lineage, watches her with calm, understanding eyes. You fear this, he says quietly. That is good. Only fools embrace power too easily. Elira clenches her fists. I am not a queen. I am just a girl who knew how to listen, a girl who got lucky. Cedric shakes his head. No, child. You are a girl who saw injustice and chose to fight. A girl who led an army not with promises of power, but with hope. A queen is not made by birthright alone. A true ruler is made by the choices she makes. Still, she saved my life, he says, not just mine, our homes, our families. You fought beside us, bled beside us. We follow you not because of your bloodline, but because you have proven yourself worthy. Then another voice. An old woman, wrinkled with age, bows low. The nobles forgot about us, left us to starve. But you, my queen, have never turned away from those in need. That is why we kneel. One by one, they speak. A farmer who lost his land to corruption. A thief who found purpose in the rebellion. A scholar who believed knowledge should belong to all. Each of them different, yet bound by a single truth. They believe in her. Elira looks around, taking in the faces of the people who had fought beside her. She remembers every sacrifice, every hardship, every moment of pain. And then she understands. Being queen is not about being born to rule. It is about choosing to rule. She takes a deep breath and steps forward. The weight of the crown is heavy as it is placed upon her head, but she does not falter. Her voice is steady as she speaks the words that will change the kingdom forever. Together, we will rebuild. The first morning of her reign is unlike any other. Elira stands on the palace balcony, overlooking the city she once walked through as a servant. The sun rises over the rooftops, bathing the streets in golden light. But where there was once fear and oppression, there is now something new. Hope. The people had cheered when she was crowned, but she knows that victory in battle is only the beginning. True change comes after the war is won. Her first act as queen is to tear down the walls that separated the nobles from the common folk. The grand halls of the palace, once closed off to all but the elite, are now open to those who seek justice. No longer will decisions be made behind locked doors by those who do not understand the struggles of the people. She reforms the council, replacing corrupt nobles with those who had proven their loyalty to the kingdom, regardless of birth. A farmer, a blacksmith, a scholar, a knight, a healer, each given a voice where once only royals had spoken. The hardest part is deciding the fate of her enemies. Lord Carrion and his closest allies are brought before her in chains. Some beg for mercy, others curse her name. The nobles who betrayed the kingdom expect her to be ruthless, to execute them as they would have done to her. But Elira has seen enough bloodshed. She grants justice, not revenge. Some are sentenced to exile, others forced to labor and rebuild the villages they once exploited. The worst offenders, those who ordered the slaughter of innocents, are given swift punishment. Justice must be firm, but never cruel. Some of her old enemies surprise her. A noblewoman who once mocked her as a maid now kneels, swearing loyalty. A knight who fought against her in battle offers his sword, willing to serve under a queen who earned her throne with her own hands. Not all accept her rule easily. Some still whisper behind closed doors, unwilling to bow to a former servant. But Elira does not rule for their approval. She rules for those who have never had a voice. She walks through the streets without guards, speaking to the people as she once did in secret. She ensures food reaches the villagers first, before the nobles dine in luxury. She does not sit on the throne all day. She works, just as she always has. Her friends stand by her side. The rebels who fought with her now hold positions of trust. The thief who once stole from nobles now helps manage the city's resources. The scholar who taught her in secret now teaches others, opening schools for all, not just the wealthy. One evening, she stands before the great mirror in the royal chambers, the same place where, years ago, she once bowed to those who never saw her as more than a servant. She no longer sees a maid in the reflection, she sees a queen. And as the people begin to rebuild, as justice replaces fear, as hope spreads across the land, she knows her journey was never just about reclaiming a throne. It was about building a kingdom where no one is ever powerless again.